After the Civil War, dozens of Confederate officers refused to accept defeat and emigrated to a foreign army. They chose Egypt. The Confederacy collapsed in April 1865. For the soldiers and officers of the defeated South, the choices were grim: stay and submit to Reconstruction, or leave. Some went to Brazil, where slavery was still legal and ex-Confederates could rebuild the plantations they'd lost. Some went to Mexico. But a remarkable number, historians estimate around 400 officers and soldiers, went to Egypt to serve in the army of Khedive Ismail, the ruler of Egypt who was modernizing his military and needed experienced officers who understood the Civil War's new tactics and technology. The most significant of them was General William Wing Loring, one-armed, combat-hardened, a veteran of the Mexican-American War, the Seminole Wars, and 4 years of Confederate service. Loring arrived in Egypt in 1869 and eventually commanded Egyptian forces in the field. Around him gathered a constellation of ex-Confederate officers, former cavalry commanders, artillerists, engineers, men who had fought at Gettysburg and Shiloh and Vicksburg and lost, and who now found themselves drilling Egyptian soldiers in the shadow of the pyramids. They brought American military doctrine to a medieval system and modernized it with startling efficiency. They introduced American-style drill manuals translated into Arabic. They designed fortifications using principles developed during the Siege of Petersburg. They organized logistics along lines they'd learned and improved upon during 4 years of desperate improvisation. Khedive Ismail, meanwhile, had ambitions. Egypt in the 1870s was expanding aggressively southward into Sudan and westward into Africa. In 1875, he ordered an invasion of Abyssinia, modern Ethiopia, after a border dispute escalated into a confrontation with Emperor Johannes IV. Loring and his Confederates found themselves leading Egyptian armies into the mountainous highlands of East Africa. The campaign was a disaster. The Abyssinians, fighting in terrain they knew intimately, shattered the Egyptian forces at the Battle of Gundit in November 1875. Then, in March 1876, they destroyed the remaining Egyptian army at the Battle of Gura. Loring and his officers survived, but the Khedive's expansionist dream was finished. The campaigns also revealed cracks in the Egyptian military that the Confederates hadn't been able to fix: problems of supply, of command structure, of an army that had been modernized at the top, but remained traditional at every other level. One Confederate officer walked away from the wars with a different legacy entirely. Colonel Charles Chilelong, a Maryland-born former Confederate who had joined the Egyptian service, was sent by the Khedive on a separate mission into Central Africa. He traveled up the Nile, made contact with the Kabaka of Uganda, and produced the first accurate maps of Lake Victoria's northern shore, helping resolve a long-standing geographic debate about the source of the Nile. The Confederate colony in Egypt lasted roughly a decade. By the early 1880s, most of the officers had returned to America or moved on elsewhere. Egypt fell into financial crisis, came under British occupation in 1882, and the Khedive's modernization project collapsed along with his ambitions. But for a decade, men who had fought to preserve slavery in Georgia and Virginia were drilling Muslim soldiers in Sudan, mapping African rivers, and fighting battles that would never appear in the history books taught at West Point or the military academies of the South. They had lost one war and gone looking for another. They found it on a different continent entirely, in the service of a different kind of empire, in a chapter of American history that doesn't fit neatly into any story we tell about what the Civil War meant or what the men who fought it did next.